Hey, it's Tom. I'm Charlie's mechanic. Today we're just running through the bike, getting it all ready for the race in Leogang. So come with us and see what we do. So first things first, we just fully strip the bike down, take all the components off, all the bolts out, pull apart the suspension linkage. We just check everything over, make sure it's not damaged from the previous race, make sure there's no grit and dirt in there, and then now we have to put it all back together and make sure it's working smoothly. This here is all the parts we pulled off the bike. So we've got all the frame components, seat stay, all the linkages. So while they're off the bike, we can just go through and check that all the bearings are working smoothly. This bike's only done 2 races, so everything's still pretty good. So we'll continue to run what we've got there. And then we've just got the derailleur, shifters, cranks, chainring, handlebars, just all the stuff that's come off the frame here, ready to go back on. Right now we're going to start putting it back together. We got our grease and our Loctite for all the bolts. So just going to start putting everything back together. So yeah, let's crack into it. At the moment, we're just getting the brakes ready again for this race, and the whole season we're running the SRAM Mavens. So I've just given them a little clean out with some little air cleaners, get all the dust and grit off the pistons here, and then now I'm just resetting them and I'll give them a cycle and get them feeling fresh, and then after that we'll bleed them up. With these new brakes, and all brakes really, it's super important to keep these pistons clean. The cleaner they are and the more freely they move, the better your brake feels and the more powerful it is. So every race I clean and just cycle them through, and it makes the brakes feel really good. We've put the mud tires on. Charlie went and he's seen a few photos of the track and it's looking quite fresh in places. So we had a quick chat and we've just, put the Hillbillies on there, like intermediate tire. So we're gonna see how those go for practice tomorrow. If it ends up quite dry, the Cannibal is really good and we know what it's like already, so we can just put that on for race day. But we're gonna try this first and see how we go, because it has been quite wet here the last couple of days. So we got the suspension back from SRAM. They've given it a freshen up on the forks. We've just had a lowers service just to reduce the friction. And the same with the shock. They've just done the air can for us. So keeps everything running super smooth, super supple. Right now we're just going to check the settings against our little book of all our settings from the last races, make sure it's all the same, and then we'll put it back on the bike after that. So this year we're running the Superlux Air. We actually ran the same shock last year. We've made a few little adjustments over the off season. We're just running this one because Charlie really likes the way it feels. It suits the bike really well, but it's got a lot of support in the middle of the shock. So he's not bottoming out. It keeps the bike sitting in like a really nice part of the travel, and it just works really well for us. So we're gonna stick with running that. And the same for the Lyric. We ran the Lyric last year as well. We've done a lot of back-to-back testing with this and the Zab, and we've done back-to-back testing with this against different shocks. The Lyric we've chosen just because it has a bit more compliance on like off-camber routes and coming into some corners where there's a few holes. We can get the damper and the air spring to feel very similar between the two forks, but the Lyric just slightly holds the edge at slower speeds when you're trying to find grip on rough off-cambers, which we tend to have a lot of in Enduro, so that's why we're running the Lyric. So usually I start the bike on rebuild day, which is always the day before practice. I start the bike about 9 or 10 in the morning, and it usually takes me about 6 hours, depending on what else is going on in the day and how long a few little bits and pieces take. But I always do the exact same process every week. So the first thing I do is take off the fork and shock, and those go to SRAM. After that, I pull everything off the bike, disassemble the rear triangle and give it all a clean, check over all the individual frame components, and clean the headset, make sure all the bearings are still good. After that, I put it together in the same order every time. So I do the suspension linkage, the derailleur, the cranks, and then the fork and shock go in when they're back from SRAM. After that, I'm going to put the brakes back on, bleed those now that they're in the bike and they're in the position that they're going to be in. And that is pretty much my process. One of the things I do, which you'll see here, is I put a little mark on the brake lever and on the handlebar. So when I take the brakes off to send the fork away and have the bike disassembled, I can line up Charlie's brakes to exactly where he had them before when I put them back on. That way it's all in the same position that he likes it. And the same on the stem, I always memorize where this little point is so his bars can get aligned where they need to be. So that's one of the main things if you want it to be consistent, is just having little marks so you know exactly where all the components are going, so you can hop back on the bike and it just feels like home. Right now what we're doing is just making sure that the brakes are perfectly aligned, they're not rubbing, and the pads are nice and centered in the caliper and even on the rotor. So that way you get the best possible brake feel, you get really good power, and if it's rubbing, it's just slowing you down, so you don't want that at all. So we do both the brakes, get them running good, and then after I've done those, I usually move on to the gears, just make sure they're all shifting up and down as they should do. For this race, I put on a brand new chain, and we've also got a new chainring on. Just the other ones have had a little bit of use, so just swap them out, keep it all fresh, and then those ones can go on one of our training bikes. We've done all the final touches on the bike. We've settled suspension and tire pressures so they're good for the day, because sometimes they go down overnight when the temperature changes, and just given it one final check over, and now it's practice day, so we're going to go out.